girls, if they're silent when they're being married, then that counts as consent. And so that for me was, it wasn't even more about not complaining. It was like, even if in fear, they don't say anything, it's considered consent.
Hello, everyone. Today on the Sherazad Foundation mini podcast, I'm joined by the multi award winning American photojournalist, Stephanie Sinclair, whose work on and the commitment to gender based human rights has played a profound role in drawing to the world's attention indescribable injustices. Much of the time, photojournalists hold a camera up to situations that shock us all, and they leave it at that. But Stephanie has gone many steps further than that in establishing Too Young to Wed, a groundbreaking initiative to combat forced child marriage in Afghanistan and beyond. Stephanie, I'm so happy to have you with us at the Sherazad Foundation, and thank you for your time and for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure and an honor. I look forward to the conversation.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, one of the great joys in my life is being in touch with people who have kind of bounced around the world like I have, maybe in different ways for different reasons. But it means that you get overlap with someone in the most extraordinary ways and unexpected ways. And I know you and I have various countries and cultures in our kind of armory that we love. And describing those countries and those cultures to people who don't know them is always something that I'm trying to do. And when I return from a journey, for example, to Afghanistan or Kenya or somewhere else, I find myself looking at my memories and my thoughts of that place and wondering how I will describe them. We're today talking mostly about Afghanistan, but please feel free to talk about it anywhere else as well. But I'd love it if you could maybe talk a little bit about your connections with Afghanistan and how you ended up there and what it means to you.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. Um, yeah, Afghanistan is, as you know, a very special, unique place. I think most journalists who've worked in Afghanistan, over, when the wars were happening there, kind of fell in love with it. I think that there is, I don't know, something magnetic, um, extremely difficult, but also really beautiful about the country. Um, and it's a place there where you really, not to sound extreme, I mean, like cliche, but it's really like you see the extremes of society, some of the most generous, hospitable people who literally risk their lives for you, and then some of them, sadly, some of the deepest, gender human rights abuses that you can find. And this sort of extensive continuum of the human experience. And and I think that it's clearly, it's been through so many decades of conflict that it's has its own character that's come from that as well. Not, it's like, and so what you have is this, it feels to me, as someone who, it is surrounded by Afghans on a daily basis. They work in my office, they run my teams. Like that, there's an incredible strength, strength there. There's an incredible sense of grief as well for a lot of the people we deal with. There's an incredible sense of pride, and so yeah, it's a really nuanced and powerful and interesting, culture to work alongside. Certainly, I facilitate their work, the Afghan team's work. I don't lead it, and I'm just here to kind of help them be able to have the resources and support they need to support the girls in their community.
Can you talk about the first time you went to Afghanistan and maybe you know, any memories of how it hit you? I mean, I'm just remembering the first time, it was 20 years ago, that I flew into Kabul. And I just, my family is partly from Afghanistan, and I'd grown up with this myth of Afghanistan. And suddenly I was there with, the mad, crazy, whatever it was. It was something that I couldn't define, but I was so incredibly moved to be there. It was like I had crossed a forbidden frontier, if you know what I
Mm,
mean. How did
yeah.
you feel?
Yeah, I definitely felt the same way. I mean, I'm not, it was my first time that I visited in 2003, and I don't have any Afghan family members, although I kind of do now, but not at the time. I definitely didn't. And and I just remember being, just kind of, it had been a place of lore in my mind as well, because it was a couple years after 9/11 had happened. And I was still in my 20s. That dates me. So, but I think that one of the memories that really moved me and stays with me is, for instance, like, I had a pretty rough entry into the country. I was assigned by Marie Claire magazine at the time. I was known as kind of a conflict photographer, but working on social issues around conflicts. I was working in Iraq and other places. And I was asked to go to Afghanistan for Marie Claire to photograph girls who had set themselves on fire and in Herat. So it was a very tough introduction into the community. Um, and 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 what I found really interesting and frankly life-changing, I'm still working there, this many years later because it was such a powerful experience, was I had a wonderful, very sensitive male translator at the time, named Sahil, who was working, we were in the female burn ward with me. So like that's not a typical thing you would expect, but he was so gentle and so kind to these women and to their families and to these girls. And the expectation was that, in this really conservative society, you wouldn't be able to have a male translator in a situation like that. And but he was so disarming and professional and kind that the families allowed it. And they were in such a desperate situation. I mean, this was really a suicide attempt. And and you had these lives at their homes that was clearly very trauma based on, deep cyclical poverty, gender-based violence, child marriage, all of these things were leading these girls into, these girls and young women to make this horrific decision. And so I kind of entered it in this very, this world of two polar opposites of my expectations. But then as I continued working there, and I think like the next year I went back and started working on the issue of child marriage. What did this look like for girls? And met a wonderful girl named Mejgan who had been married at 11. And her father had sold her. Um, he was a drug addict, and she had run away. So she showed incredible internal strength and had run away, and she was in a shelter. And she was telling me in one breath, like, how she had never felt love before being in this shelter that she was in. And then, like, within the same day, like, we were jumping rope together. And like, she was just a kid. She was 15 years old and going to school. And so again, like, and these women were running this shelter. and doing a beautiful job there. And so it was kind of, again, you're seeing these really extreme life experiences and the amount of hope and a true life trajectory change that can happen with intervention. So those were my initial impressions over kind of my first like 2 years there that kept me wanting to continue to go back because you could see with that type of possibility for change, even though it's kind of gone in many different directions since, that there was a possibility to impact girls' lives.
Amazing. And, you know, I've always thought Afghanistan is kind of this land of paradoxes, and it's certainly a land where childhoods aren't the childhoods that we know in Europe, United States, or elsewhere. You know, these are childhoods that have been erased as, you know, they're kind of like the Victorian era childhood, you know, that with responsibility and and terrible trauma a lot of the time. Not, I mean, I would say not only for girls, but for boys as well. I mean, I've, you know,
Absolutely.
I've just, while you were talking, I just got a flash of being at Bamiyan, you know, and actually at Bandi Amir, if you know Bandi Amir, and I watched like a 11-year-old boy take an AK-47 rifle to pieces and put it back together, clean it, and I'm still thinking about that, you know, almost 20 years later, because that kid didn't have the childhood, just like the girls you're talking about. Um, in the news, we keep hearing, and particularly in recent days, of um, increasing, you know, difficulties in legislation about about childhood marriage in Afghanistan. I I caught something on the Guardian newspaper website a few days ago, I think 4 or 5 days ago, saying maybe you saw it too. It's what was it saying? It was saying that um, the Taliban now, that women can't complain and they can't even get a divorce. That's what I think I saw. Is that what, you know, you've taken from the new legislation?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, was directly related to what we were working on is that it said that girls, if they're silent when they're being married, then that counts as consent. And so that for me was, it wasn't even more about not complaining. It was like even if in fear they don't say anything, it's considered consent. And so that was a pretty devastating decree that came out. And it's definitely taken our, it's our team has felt that in our hearts. And we had a big team meeting actually yesterday, and our Afghan team was particularly upset. Just it's, they have families there, their own girls are there, and just to be in a place where they're raising their families and they're trying to do good and they're trying to, we're running these covert schools and livelihood opportunities for girls and women, as much as we can. And but it's just, it feels like it's just getting closed, more closed and closed and closed, and they're feeling it because they have their own daughters they're raising, and they'll pop in on the video screen, during a meeting, and it just like reminds you, um, what, she just is like any one of our kids. And then, but then she's facing such a daunting, and this is my male colleague, who was really upset about it. He was just like, thinking about his daughter as he's trying to raise his family there. So yeah, it wasn't just the women on our team, it's our male colleagues as well. And
And the
yeah.
danger, you know, the thing that strikes us on a daily basis, being in touch with women across Afghanistan, is the danger if they're found out, if they're discovered, even we've been supporting an initiative, a wonderful initiative, to do art therapy for women and girls who essentially are locked down a lot of the time and they're bored. And anyway, our entire initiative as Other Women is about providing free internet, directly to women, not even knowing their identities, of course, to protect them. But one of the lady who runs the art therapy, she talks about creating artwork and then having to destroy it once she's created it. I mean, it's 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 unimaginable for us, because it's so dangerous to have artwork, right? This is like out of, World War II or Pol Pot in Cambodia or something like that. And I think hopefully one day soon we'll be looking back at this because this is crazy. Could you describe a little bit about really the hands-on work that Too Young to Wed does, and how do you how do you you know put it together and make a path for yourselves?
I mean, yeah, I think, I mean, first of all, well, the goal is that when we look back at this, that the girls and the families were able to reach during this time period, it might not be everybody there, but right now, last year we had about 2,500 girls in our program, in the education program. So it was significant. And the idea being that, that they will have had a bridge support and be able, once this, de facto government is no longer in power, that they will be have enough skills and resources and support to be leaders in the next in what comes next. So so I applaud your art therapy program. That's really, really critical. We have a big psychosocial support part of our work as well. We have a whole trauma informed care, curriculum that we go through with all of our teachers. We've had over like 140 different teachers and monitors and stuff like that throughout several provinces in the country. And it's really like they're doing the hardest work. I mean, we're here to support them. They came up with the groups to do it. We take their lead on security. We take their on what the girls should be taught. Like we're following their lead. It's really this. We're providing support for them to support their own community girls. And we know this happened when the Taliban was in charge before. And I remember one of the grants we had from the Malala Fund, my grants officer told me that she was one of those girls during that time. And so, so you're able to see like this change. You could see how it can happen. And even one of our team members, I'll call her Zahra. She was married at 13 and she had multiple kids, while she was very, very young. It turned out that she ended up being widowed and went back to college during the, last 20 years. And she ended up becoming very, very well educated. And she's been part of our education program, collecting books and getting everything ready. And she testified before the, United Nations Human Rights Council last year,
Amazing.
sharing that. So it's like, and one of our team members this week told the team that her 13-year-old cousin was married recently and she was just distraught. And I had to, I reminded her about Zahra and like even this is horrible and we're going to try to do what we can to support her, but we can't intervene in every case, because it can be dangerous. So we intervene in the ones we can, but we can't do it in all of them. But it's not a fully closed door for her. We just have to stay with her and stay the course and see what, and maybe there's a program that we can develop for married girls at some point as well. That's something we're hoping to do in the future.
Nice. And while you were talking, I was wondering, and I want to ask you, I know Too Young to Wed is, you have programs in different countries. How how do the situations of these women and you know, um, the need for too young to wed play out in different countries. I'm thinking sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere, East Asia, maybe South Asia. How is a country like Afghanistan? Do you say to yourself, oh, yeah, this is exactly what we've seen elsewhere, between one country and another? Or would you say that each country and each society, each culture is very unique in the reasons that they, they have forced child marriage?
Thank you for your question. I would say it's a little bit of both. I think what we see globally, because we've worked in many countries over the years. Right now, we're in about 5 countries currently, but there's certain things that are universal. Girls are still being globally valued for their bodies, for their fertility, their labor, their sexuality, and so not for how they can contribute to society intellectually, with ideas, with leadership, with other ways that are not based around what their bodies can provide. And so that's a big part of that we see globally. And we're opening a program this summer in Western Virginia, and we see the same thing there. Girls are still very much expected to be in more household roles. They're not as expected to have the same, financial independence trajectory, those types of things. And so and what we've seen that is also global is that the girls who have the strongest self-esteem, the strongest kind of internal strength and willpower are the ones that stay safest. So we have our program works under we have the butterfly program that kind of goes throughout all of our countries and communities, and it has different elements of it, which are like life skills, education, sometimes economic stability, and I think the other global drivers are there's a lot where we see some of the worst issues are around areas that are very much impacted by climate change. So, we're working in northern Kenya where we're seeing girls very much impacted by the droughts. And one of the things we had to do there last year was just provide water to the community because you can't convince them to let their girls stay in school, not taking care of the herds if they're all just, like needing water to drink and stay alive. And the girls were having to walk further and further distances to be able to access the wells that were drying up and things like that. So that was something. And we saw that we have a program that we're working on that we launched last year in Puerto Rico, and in where there's pockets of vulnerable girls as well, and not necessarily towards child marriage per se, but towards exploitation, sexual violence, and different things. So we've kind of expanded our mission to be a bit broader than just child marriage, although child marriage is definitely a central focus for us. But we know that's where it can manifest itself differently in different communities. So not every girl is married at 16 or 15 or 13, but they might be pregnant by that age. They may be expected to have children if they're in a certain community. They may be in a union where they have an older partner. They may be trafficked or vulnerable to being trafficked. So there's different ways that can kind of play out depending on how that society is structured and what other safety nets are there. I mean, I think where you see the biggest issues is where there's a lack of government infrastructure that is there to support girls. And so that's kind of what we're providing in these more fragile areas is sort of a temporary structure until, in some cases, it might be years. In some cases, it might be like in Kenya, we've slowly been getting more government support in the area we're working. So we have, we have girls who are they're shepherds, so they're not in school because they're taking care of the animals. So we have shepherd schools, which keep girls in school a couple hours a day and allow them to still do their duties. So we're working with the government to create a curriculum that they approve. We were using an old one, but now they want us to update it. And they just started providing food for the shepherd schools. So it's kind of like in some cases, it's just a straight bridge until things change. In some cases, it's a slow integration.
You know what I love about the way you do things, and it reminds me kind of the way we do things at Sherazad, um, is that you recalibrate and you continually, evidently, continually reassess and keep asking, is this the right course? Is this the path? And something that we're very, very sensible to is that sometimes we ditch an entire project or initiative that we don't think is working and we'll come back to it at some other time. And but sometimes we realize that to make a big impact, it just takes a little balancing act, like the shepherds that you've spoken about. And I think that, apart from everything else you're doing, is so inspirational because it shows that sometimes to make a huge impact, you just need to do some tweaks within society. Yes, they're kind of major tweaks, and um, but it can lead to huge impacts, down the road. But Stephanie, I want to thank you so, so much. I've taken up far more time than I promised I would, and we are really inspired by Too Young to Wed, and by the fact that, like I said in my introduction, you maybe began your journey as a photojournalist, but um, you widened it and didn't, and I'm not going to say just take pictures, but you have, you've shown us how we should all be, I think. So, Stephanie Sinclair, thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Sahir. I mean, it's definitely an honor to be able to have this really lovely conversation with you. We appreciate your support you've shown us in the past and partnership. And I think hope goes a long way, as you were saying. Sometimes it's not the biggest, like it doesn't have to be the hugest intervention, but we've seen, and it's actually in our data, like we've seen that hope, I mean, just having the families feel seen and heard and known, like helps them hold on to making better decisions, that they're not desperate. And I think we're all kind of feeling that in some ways around the world. It's a tough time in the world right now for so many people. And so I'm grateful for your programs. I'm grateful for your spirit and your partnership. And I look forward to continuing to collaborate in different ways in the future.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you.